The political solutions so far haven't been working as the flow of drugs and human beings across the southern border seems to go nonstop. But Representative Dan Crenshaw is trying to change that. He's been tapped by the GOP to lead the effort to fight the cartels. One of his bold ideas involves bringing in the U.S. military. I spoke to the Iraq War vet just a few moments ago to learn more. Right now, the Mexican president is saying he doesn't want American servicemen in his country. Are you going to try and convince him that you can help somehow?
That's exactly right. I mean, part of this task force is figuring out what we're doing already and what we're not doing. Looking at countries where we work really, really well with the police, with the military. I would take Colombia as a prime example. For the last 30 years, we've worked with Colombia very, very closely through what's called Plan Colombia and what today is really just a longstanding relationship. That's how it should be done. Now, of course, the politics are different in Mexico. They've never really let us have a really strong military partnership. That has to change. That's just one aspect of it. There's a lot of different avenues to targeting the cartels that we need to look at, whether it's financing, whether it's the shipments of precursors coming in from China. But mostly it's about helping the Mexican military do their job. They don't have the resources they need to take on what is basically an insurgency. And you have to target these people as if they are some kind of terrorist group, because that's how they operate.
These narco terrorists are well funded and heavily armed and ruthless. Why do you think that the American military could really even stop them? I mean, we didn't do much about the drug trade in Afghanistan when we were there. It's a difficult issue.
It's definitely difficult. There's different types of drugs and there's different types of drug trades. So we're focused on fentanyl in particular. In the end, you're dealing with narco terrorist groups. They have some of their behaviors are certainly akin to terrorism. But in the end, they're businessmen. And so one of our goals, our policy goals, needs to be to disincentivize them to be pushing fentanyl across our borders, because fentanyl is the real killer here. When we talk about the drug,
how do you do that? I mean, right now they're making a ton of money. It's a cheap and easy drug to make, and so okay, I guess we kill a few customers, but we hook a lot more. I mean, how do we convince them to stop? They're not reasonable people, these cartels.
Yeah, that's why you have to target them. It's not a negotiation. It's simply putting so much pressure on them that they decide it's not in their best business interest to continue pushing fentanyl. We've been fighting the cocaine war for 20 years, and then people say, well, what's the point of that? It's not helping. It's not doing anything. That's not really the right way to look at any kind of war on drugs. I mean, you engage in a war on drugs because you're trying to mitigate as much as you can. Right, you're not going to win. You're not going to change human nature. You're not going to change people's desire to get high and do the things they do. Right, there's always going to be that demand, and I always hear it's kind of a cop out of the conversation. Well, we just have to focus on demand. Oh, really? You're going to change human nature and get people to stop doing drugs around the world? Good luck with that. Supply does create demand. Right, we've been wildly successful in getting Colombia back on its feet. Right, it was a country on the verge of collapse in the 90s, and even when I was living there, I lived there from 1998 to 2002. So I've seen how this can work. Mm-hmm. I just got back from Colombia 2 nights ago. So I have a very good idea of how well we work with them. We're not infringing on their sovereignty. We're only doing what's helpful to them. What we need to convince the Mexican government of is that is the way to do business.
Yeah,
right?
Well, that's a tall order. I mean, he is right now, that president of Mexico is he blames demand in America. If you guys didn't want the drugs, we wouldn't have a problem. And you're not welcome here, United States military. It's a tall order to convince him to let you help him.
No, it absolutely is. The only way we're going to convince him of anything is through a bipartisan effort where we have really concrete solutions that we lay out for them and convince them of it. I mean, you have to try, right?
Yeah.
We've never been that successful with Mexico. It depends on who the president is. But we've just never been as successful as we are with, say, other countries like Colombia. But we have to try, right? And what they do respond to is a sort of carrot and stick approach. In the end, they are transactional oftentimes. And so there are ways to do it. And part of the reason the task force exists is because there's nobody in government at the top who is strategically looking at this problem with the cartels and with fentanyl. There's nobody in charge of piecing together all of the different entities in the U.S. government that's working this problem set and saying, okay, what's our bigger strategy here, diplomatically, economically? What will the Mexican government respond to? What won't they respond to? What will get them to do this as opposed to, and what will work and what won't work? You have to answer those questions, which is what the purpose of the task force is.
All right. I want to switch gears a little bit. You have teamed up with AOC on legislation that would allow veterans to take part in clinical trials of psychedelics to treat PTSD, traumatic brain injuries. We have 17 vets who commit suicide every day in this country. Do you think these psychedelics could save lives?
Oh, they absolutely would. It's frustrating it's taken this long to get this legislation at least being taken seriously. We're not over the finish line yet, to be clear. But yes, it absolutely would. It's a longer conversation, but we could go over testimony after testimony after testimony of veterans that have gone through these therapies, whether it's using MDMA or another one called ibogaine, psilocybin. There are really dramatic effects.
Yeah, you told a story to the Washington Post about how twice in one night, 2 different vets talked to you about this, one over dinner and another bumped into you, I think you said, in the elevator. What did they say to you that convinced you we got to look into this?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big turning point for me because I'm like, how is this happening twice in one night, right? I've never even heard about this before. This was a few years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, well, the short answer is it saved their lives, right? That's how they explain it to me. Especially though in one case, said he tried to kill himself 5 times, and this one day of treatment just resets him. Like it resets him, and that's what you hear from them in these testimonies over and over again, because they're trying to explain what happened, and they don't. It's hard for them to explain what happened, but the best way to explain it is it's like a reset.
Yeah, you've called it chemo for the brain for your demons.
Yeah, I don't think I've called it that, but somebody probably has, and that's maybe a good way of putting it, right? It's like putting a fresh blanket of snow on all your neural connections is another way I've heard it explained. I mean, I've never done it, so I don't exactly know. I just know what these testimonies are, and a lot of them are from good friends of mine that I really trust. These are people who are really having a hard time and almost immediately changed. And that's not just their testimonies, it's their spouses as well. There's a lot of these couples who will say, this saved our marriage. Like hands down, saved our marriage. We have to get this into the hands of more people who need help. And
as everybody in our audience knows, you are a veteran yourself. If it's saving and helping so many of our vets, why is there opposition to this?
It's not even clear to me that there is, except from kind of the bureaucracy that would have to implement it. That's the obstacles that we run into tend to be from that. Some committee staff and bits and parts have gotten in the way of it. But I can't name a member of Congress or a member of the Senate who is against this. There might be. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe they haven't been educated on it. But for the most part, it's very bipartisan. We have a large swath of people from all sides of the aisle who are in support of this. So, there's really no good reason we don't get it over the finish line in a meaningful way in this year's NDAA.
All right. Congressman Dan Crenshaw, so good to have you on the show tonight. Thanks so much for talking about it.
Of course.